Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I've got an exclusive interview with Peter Kukielski over at Hudbay, the CEO. Very excited about this. I love Hudbay. They're doing a fantastic job, and Peter has been CEO for almost a year now. And what I've heard when I talked to the company almost about a year ago, everyone loves Peter. So it's thanks very much for taking the time, Peter. And I have to say that I looked at your background and all the projects you worked on, Antamina, Tech Resources. You've got some private equity experience as well. You've kind of been almost everywhere that a good CEO should be in terms of leadership and everything else. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you today. It's a Friday afternoon. It's the end of a long week. What better way to end the afternoon?
Perfect. Yeah, so maybe we'll get right to it. And I know we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but I'm a big culture guy, like talking about leadership, understanding how to create alignment. And Hudbay's got a tremendous history, and I know with your leadership and what you've seen in the past, and maybe if you could talk a bit about what's impressed you most about, before we get to culture, what's impressed you most about being the CEO of Hudbay?
Look, I think that I agree with you that Hudbay has a rich history. As you would know, Jeff, Hudbay is a pretty iconic Canadian mining company. But I would say that what impressed me first and foremost is its people. Hudbay has a disproportionately talented team for a company of its size. And this can both be a blessing and a curse. Good people need challenges. And with our company, with Hudbay, our pipeline of assets is one that has no shortage of challenges. So everybody is focused, everybody's got something to do, but you've got to keep stuff ahead of a good team. The second thing that has impressed me is the company's unique pipeline of projects that span all stages of the mine development cycle. So, if you think about on the exploration side, right next to the Constancia pit, we've got the Constancia Norte exploration property. And then a little bit further away from Constancia, we have the Coincha Norte property, which we're about to start exploring actually this month. And then in the north of Peru, we've got the Yaguen property that we optioned from Vale. We have incredible satellites to the north of Constancia called Maria Reina, Caballito, Cosiorco. These are all mines or potential mines that have incredible radiometric footprints that are pretty exciting. And then, of course, we've got a regional land package in Peru and Chile. In Manitoba, there's in-mine exploration at Lalor. There's a Snow Lake regional exploration package. In the United States, we've got our Nevada assets. And then as you move sort of up the pipeline or actually maybe it's down the pipeline at the resource definition stage, there's all the zones in the New Britannia. There's 1901, which we discovered last year. There's Mason, which we acquired in 2018 and continue to advance. And then we have assets for which we've completed feasibility studies, such as Rosemont. So a really, really exciting pipeline of assets ahead of us that I think is pretty unique in the mining space. So, as you know, people and assets are what make the mining business.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that, Peter. And there's lots to love, of course. So, and maybe a bit about, and you've seen different leadership styles and models and worked for many different companies and great projects. So, just curious, how do you make it work at Hudbay? What's the culture there? Is there a culture of innovation? Is there how do you keep everyone glued and aligned together?
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned innovation. I would say that three characteristics that are dominant at Hudbay are self-sufficiency, efficiency, and innovation. These are all highly valued at Hudbay. Self-sufficiency has been really important as the company hasn't had cash to throw at challenges, but it's had highly motivated, capable people. So we don't spend a lot of money on consultants and prefer to drive solutions using in-house resources. I can give you many an example, and I'll do that as we continue to talk. But we have a guy who heads up technical services for us by the name of Peter Amelangsen, who has solved a lot of problems for us with pure brain power. Similarly, efficiency is mission critical when one is not endowed with top tier assets. So Constancia is a super mine, but its ore is lower grade than many other mines. But this gets addressed by a focus on continually improving efficiencies. And then technical innovation is equally highly valued at Hudbay, as it represents a means of doing things better. So effectively, what it presents is a means of both solving problems and creating opportunities. An example of that might be what we're doing at Lalor with the New Britannia mill and pouring early gold. So what happened was we had a schedule that had the copper flotation facility on its critical path. To finish this, we needed until the third quarter of next year, which meant that we were only going to pour gold at New Britannia, possibly in the fourth quarter of the year. However, what the technical team did is they figured that there was a way to bypass the copper flotation circuit being on the critical path and to put up a modular flotation circuit that allowed us to separate the copper from the material flow, which allowed us then to pour gold 3 months earlier. And then the question is, does this are these modular cells wasted after that? Well, they're redundant, not at all. They get used to scalp talc out of the stream, which means that our payables are better when we send concentrate to the smelter. So these are just little ways in which technical innovation creates value for the company, but the aggregate as a whole can be pretty extraordinary. So Hudbay innovation is highly prized as an element of our culture.
That's great. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
And Jeff, just to continue that a little bit, if you look at Peru, for example, in Peru, we have only 2 expats at the entire operation. So there's real pride of ownership there. The Constancia concentrator is the cleanest concentrator that I've ever seen. It's 5 years old or so, but it is the cleanest concentrator I have ever seen. And that's because people take real pride in it. And we're close with our communities. Constancia has never experienced an interruption of operations as a result of community action. So culture is a key element to that. It's the way we relate to people. It's the way we take pride in our facilities. Manitoba, as you know, has a storied history of finding and developing new deposits. It's got an incredible history of extending mine lives well beyond what was initially planned. And they've done that without any help from the outside. So, going back to what I said in the beginning, I think that self-sufficiency, efficiency, and innovation are some of the most highly prized or highly valued elements of Hudbay's culture.
Yeah, and that's great when you have great technical staff and allowing them to make decisions and be agile, and that makes a lot of sense to me. That's great, Peter. Excellent. I guess maybe a question about we do these surveys every year in the top 10 list, and every year it comes. Well, the last 3 years has come back as number 1 is license to operate. ESG and so forth, and of course we hosted a seminar recently on that, and so it's growing. It's people are still trying to understand the metrics, but maybe I can ask. How does Hudbay manage or enhance its license to operate, its ESG footprint or in relations with local communities?
That's a really interesting question. ESG is considered by many as being a focus of investors in recent times. I think that for us, it simply makes business sense. I honestly don't think of ESG as ESG. I prefer to think of it as sustainability. And at Hudbay, there's little more important than sustainability, which covers all elements of safety, health, environmental integrity, social responsibility, and of course, sound governance. I would say Constancia provides a great example of ESG or sustainability. When Constancia is eventually depleted, we intend to leave behind a community that is way better off than it was when we encountered it. Today, we have a diverse workforce with some 40% of our mine operators coming from the community, which I think is pretty rare. There are increasing numbers of women joining our operators from the community. One is in fact training to be a shovel operator. What happened was we had a woman operating a shovel who came from Cajamarca, where it's fairly common. One of our people saw this woman operating a shovel, and she said, "Hey, I want to do this." So of course, our guys latched onto it, and sooner or later, she was being trained. So my thinking is that, or our thinking is that when Constancia is depleted, this woman will be able to work at any other mine in Peru, not just in the Southern Corridor, anywhere in Peru she wants. We employ shovel operators from Cajamarca because they have a lot of capability there. There's no reason why the community of Chiaroya can't provide a shovel operator in the north of Peru. The services that we procure from the community have resulted in sustainable businesses for that community. So why does this make business sense? Well, to begin with, as I said, we've not experienced a single operational disruption at Constancia arising out of community action. And I believe that's a result of the social engagement that we have with the community. And on top of that, we're the safest copper mine in the country. We have very, very few lost time incidents. Last year we had 1, the year before we had 0. So, I mean, these are all elements that I think contribute to social license. But social license goes so much beyond just the mine. I think, ESG, of course, involves environmental integrity or environmental protection. It involves social license. It involves governance. All of these elements, to me, are key contributors in the end to sustainability. And at Hudbay, we have a genuine focus on sustainability. And, if you look at our annual report, you will see that the lion's share of it is actually devoted to the idea of sustainability.
That's great. Pierre, I really like the story about, because a lot of times you talk about, not you, but the industry talks about ESG, but you don't see it, right? And the story about seeing the woman drive the truck and people wanting to be like her and knowing there's opportunities, that's great. And the more we communicate about stories like that and how we're doing great things in local communities, I think that's fantastic. Maybe I could switch gears a bit because everyone's kind of all excited about Lalor and how the gold production is increasing and recoveries are going up, and it's all very exciting times, and you almost want to think that is Hudbay becoming more of a gold company than a copper company. So I don't know, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are you thinking? Yeah.
Well, Hudbay remains a copper-focused company with a growing gold business. I think you see in our materials that we expect in 2022 that about 30% of our consolidated revenues will arise out of precious metals. But there's no reason why a copper company shouldn't have precious metals. A lot of gold companies actually strive to have a copper element in their portfolio because it helps them extend resource lives. But to your question, in some cases, investors are taking notice of our gold exposure, given the optionality that it offers. But as I say, we do remain focused on copper. But more than just being focused on copper, we are focused on delivery, as I believe that delivery is what will liberate shareholder confidence in us and share price appreciation, which in turn, I think, will enhance our currency and ultimately avail us of new opportunities. And if gold is a vehicle or a piece of the puzzle that allows us to grow into what we can be, I welcome its presence in our portfolio, and I think our investors do. We are continually asked by investors and analysts whether a gold mine belongs in a base metals company. Well, today, Lalor is not a gold mine, but it will be a gold mine in 2022, or certainly with 60% of its revenues being derived out of gold. But there's far more than Lalor in the Snow Lake camp. There's the 1901 deposit that we're doing a pre-feasibility study on this year. There are other deposits that we will, in the interim, discover and expose. And we're building this big plan around Lalor and around the new Britannia mill refurbishment that drives towards something very, very interesting, I think. And maybe, you know, if you contemplate the LaRonde mine, it started off as a base metals mine and it ended up as a gold mine. Well, Lalor's gold-rich zone is open at depth. If you take what we call lens 17 and lens 27, we have not drilled down below those zones, but we know that they are open at depth, and there is potential that Lalor could become another LaRonde. But at the same time, there's lots of base metals there. So the optionality that it creates, we start exposing or daylighting some of that value is pretty huge. And when the time comes, that optionality will liberate opportunity, as I say. But in the meanwhile, I think investors are taking increased notice. Our own investors like very much what they're seeing as we continue to make progress in Manitoba. And let's see where that goes.
Yeah, that's great. And this, you know, talking about growing gold production, that's one thing you don't get from an ETF, right? So you get the volume, and actually, great point about once you're in a region like Snow Lake and Lalor and lots of other deposits around there that could be potentially unlocked, if you will. Yeah, that's great. And actually, maybe because right now you are producing a lot of copper, and you know, I love the whole you know, green movement and EV, and maybe want to get your thoughts on, and with your tremendous background in base metals and so forth. What do you think about the copper price?
You know, copper price, of course, exists as a function of supply and demand and utilization in the market, and in many cases, sentiment. I really think that copper is fundamental to society. In fact, I know copper is fundamental to society. And you know, Hudbay is a copper-focused company because we have a deep conviction in copper and its price. Now, if you think of copper in the short term, you have sort of this disconnect between demand centers and supply centers. So the key areas of demand for copper today are in Asia, especially China, and China's trying to expand its economy. It has rededicated itself to infrastructure development and urbanization, and is a strong source of demand for copper. On the other hand, the supply of copper comes largely from the Americas, which have been most deeply impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So you have this disconnect between supply and demand. At the same time, in the Americas, because of the pandemic, you have projects that have been delayed, and costs of those projects have been rising. So that disconnect speaks very, very strongly in favor of a good copper price in the short term, as well as in the medium term. The medium term driven mainly by the lack of a decent pipeline and delays in that pipeline. Then in the longer term, you have, as you referred to, the desire of society to move into a greener future. And a greener future certainly means decarbonization. What does that require? Decarbonization requires electricity. Electricity requires, as a fundamental component, copper as a conductor. And there is no, I don't believe, any substitute for copper in the function that it performs. You know, aluminum has replaced copper for high tension transmission, for example, but it's not a material that lends itself to a ductility that's required in motors. Electrical vehicles, lots and lots of copper in it. At the same time, copper remains one of the greenest metals there is in terms of carbon utilization, or carbon that is utilized in its production. So almost everything that the world needs today in terms of a drive towards a greener future requires copper. So I believe the long-term demand of copper is certainly very, very positive, which again speaks well towards price. You know, we don't need copper prices that spike periodically because of crazy things that go on. I just believe copper at a steady price, as we're seeing today, will be probably a hallmark of copper going forward into the future. And because there is a lack of it in the geographical centers that use it most, speaks well to the future. Now, I do believe also that in the United States and elsewhere, but primarily, certainly in a lot of the United States, is pretty well committed as a result of the pandemic to injecting. Sorry. Sorry, I thought you asked something.
No, but yeah.
I believe that the United States is pretty committed to stimuli into the economy. And in the past, stimulus packages in the United States have sort of been directed at financial institutions, such as in the global financial crisis. But today, I believe that economic stimulus is not guided towards financial institutions, it's more guided towards the consumer side of the population. And if that is the case, many of the dollars injected into through stimulus will reach consumers, which ultimately will result in investment, which will result in more consumption of copper. So that complements or supplements the demand that we're seeing in Asia. So again, speaks well to a very, very strong medium-term and long-term future for copper.
Excellent. Yeah, it's one thing I miss about the mining conferences is the debate between Pierre Lassonde for gold and Robert Friedland for copper, and they make a case for both. They're both very compelling. With Hudbay, you've got both, right? And with the growing copper production, as you mentioned. So is there? I mean, do you have a view on do you like one metal versus the other better? Or is there if you had to increase production or do something, organically or inorganic, would you favor one versus the other, Peter?
At Hudbay, clearly we would favor copper simply because we have sort of hitched ourselves to the copper wagon. But we've done that for a reason, as I say, because we have conviction around it. You can understand what it is that drives copper demand. It's less certain what drives gold demand. Uncertainty seems to drive gold demand. But it has always been a store of value over history. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, if we were to look to expand in any particular direction, and if we were forced to make a choice, we would choose copper. That does not mean we don't enjoy our exposure to gold, and we'll continue to enjoy that exposure to gold. But certainly I believe that the company would select copper.
Well, right now you're blessed with both, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Maybe thinking longer term, like over the next 5 years, with all the great attributes that Hudbay has, what's your view? What excites you about the future of Hudbay, in that sort of time frame? It may be longer, I don't know.
Look, I think that we are well positioned for the next 5 years with the team that we have and the asset pipeline that we have. That's why I came here. I saw Hudbay as the ideal platform to build a Canadian copper champion. I think that we are a company that's focused on creating value, and a company that's focused on growing by liberating value. I see us in the next 5 years being a real Canadian copper champion, and I think there's an extraordinary opportunity for us to do that. And I'm joined by a team that, to a person, is equally excited about achieving that goal. We want to grow the company, but we want to grow the company responsibly while creating value for our shareholders, all of our stakeholders, and ourselves. And we see copper as being the vehicle to basically achieve that vision.
Great. No, that's great. It's I'm very excited about the mining sector right now. With all the things you mentioned about green metals, the transformation that's happening, the digitalization, the focus on license to operate, ESG, all the great things are helping to make our sector better. And it's been going on for decades, but this has amplified it in the last couple of years, which is great. And some of the stories you mentioned. So one of the things that I hear about it, and there's some debate about it, but how do you attract some of the younger generation to mining? I've been attracted to it for most of my life, and I just want to understand maybe your perspective. How do we get more younger engineers, geologists, more diversity? How do we go about doing that, you think?
Mining is such a fascinating space. You don't, if you want to stay at home and be on a keyboard, mining probably isn't your thing. I have 3 daughters, and none of my 3 daughters is going to elect to go into the mining space. And I probably didn't do my job well when they were very, very young. But none of them are real, particularly technical driven. But what they do understand and what they argue for as well, or they advocate, is that mining is fundamental to society. Anything that you touch, eat, drink, or use is either mined or grown. So, if I look at the glass that I just drank from when I took a sip of water, it's made of silicon. Where do silicons come from? It's mined. So if I look at the table that I'm sitting at, it's grown. Almost everything in it is mined. So it is absolutely fundamental to society. And I think that the challenge is that for us is that people who do this well and transform our space will be incredibly well rewarded. And communicating to young people the challenge that mining offers, but the reward that it also offers for success, I think can be motivational. Now, we don't have a terribly fantastic history in the past. Mining has been seen as something that disturbs the environment. And of course it disturbs the environment, but it does not have to disturb it permanently or in ways that are permanently damaging. And if you have a group of young people coming into it who are environmentally conscious, who do understand what mining delivers to society, and who are committed to making sure it does it better, if people are able to do that, for sure they will be recognized and they will be rewarded for it, and they will make the world a better place. So, I believe that it's an industry that offers challenge. In fact, it offers more than just challenge to make it a better space. Mining offers you the ability to travel around the world. Okay, during a pandemic, we're not looking to travel around the world, perhaps. But I have spent my career on almost every continent. I have children who've lived in the United States, Peru, Canada, the United Kingdom, and who are so grateful for having had that experience, and are citizens of the world as a result of that. And even though they're not going to enter into the mining industry, they are advocates for it, which is, I think, what will help us to draw younger people into this business. And we've got to work a lot harder at it. We've got to educate people about what it is that we do and what we're striving to do. And we've got to try to turn the tide to make sure that those people who are not responsible in mining are not able to do so.
Yeah. Well, great points, Peter. And I've got 3 kids, all engineers, but none in mining. So I've still got some work to do, and I think I've got a few more years to do it. But I love the point about maybe not in this environment travel, but learning about different cultures. Working in Africa, working in South America. There's so much that we don't know. Living in our fish bubbles sometimes. So a great point. So Peter, I don't have any other questions to ask you, but I want to thank you very much for taking the time today. It was a real pleasure having you on and doing this interview and really getting to know you better and the company better now under your leadership. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. It was actually quite fun.